Totals for week 7. Total expenses were $1,058 at 49 cents per mile. Total revenue was $4,030 at $1.88 per mile. That brought our net settlement to $2,971 at $1.38 per mile. Welcome back to Trucking the 7 Seas. This is episode number 87, and in this episode, we're going to go over week 7 of running my own authority. For this episode, we run primarily in Texas and Oklahoma before taking a long load out to the west. If you're new to this channel, welcome. I started this channel in order to show exactly what truck drivers make. We started as a company driver, working for Night Transportation, moved on to a lease operator, working for Night Transportation, then an owner operator, working for Landstar, and now we are an owner operator running our own authority. I show all of the loads I take, what the revenue is, what the expenses are, and what my net cash flow is, and I compile all of this information that I put into a spreadsheet that I show you at the end of every video. So if this is a topic that interests you, follow the channel. But last episode, we left off in Whitesboro, Texas. So we dropped a load in Whitesboro, Texas, which is just north of Dallas, and then we were looking for another one. So I'm trying to run basically from Texas to the Midwest and back, and that's basically my strategy, or what has been my strategy for the last couple of weeks. So that's where I was trying to get to. So I was looking around and I couldn't find a load going to Ohio or anything like that. So I was looking, couldn't find anything, but then I ended up finding this load right over here. I'll put it right there where the light is. This one was going from Mesquite, Texas to St. Louis, Missouri. So Mesquite, Texas is Dallas / Fort Worth, however you want to put it. Not a bad load. Pay as a pay, about $1,000. I did have a clock that wasn't my clock was almost expired, so I couldn't take a very long load. So this one, 600 miles going to St. Louis, was fine enough. I picked it up on Friday and then ran it there Friday / Saturday. Got it there Saturday, reset Sunday, and then delivered it Monday in St. Louis. So then I was in St. Louis, which is an okay market. So that's what we're doing. Not the greatest load, but it got me through the weekend, and that's just what I needed. So that's what I did. That's what I booked. And now we're going to St. Louis, Missouri. Let's go. Okay, so we dropped that load in St. Louis, Missouri, and then I was looking to get back to Texas or maybe like Ohio or something like that and just continue my streak of running Texas to the Midwest, Midwest to Texas, that sort of thing. So that's what I was looking for, and this is when I actually kind of started to run into some problems. So looking around, couldn't find a whole lot, but then I ended up finding a load going from Alton, Illinois, which is just on the border with St. Louis, so it's right next to it. Found a load going from Alton, Illinois to Ohio, and went there. Went to the shipper, got there, and basically the load wasn't good. So broker screwed up, didn't have a load ready or whatever, so I didn't have a load. However, I did get a truck order not used, which was $150, so it was fine. It took like an hour or something to get over there, so it wasn't a huge deal. So I did get a TONU or TUNU, however you want to say it, but truck order not used. So they ordered a truck, which was me. I went over there, got there, they didn't need a truck, so you get paid when that happens. So I got $150 for it. So that happened, but then I was still trying to find a load either to Texas or maybe Ohio or something like that. So I was looking around, and long story short, couldn't find anything. So I was like, all right, well, what do I do now? So I was looking around, and then I ended up finding this load right over here. So this one's going from St. Peters, Missouri to Enid, Oklahoma. Enid, Oklahoma is about 150 miles north of Oklahoma City. Kind of in the middle of nowhere. Not the greatest area to go to, but I was just like, I needed to book something, and I'm really trying to keep a load in my truck. That's kind of my new thing. Not new thing, but I'm really trying to keep a load in my truck at all times, even if it doesn't pay the greatest or whatever. That's what that Missouri load was about. I'm like, I just want to get something in my truck, right? Because sitting is no good. So I didn't want to sit, so I booked this one going to Enid, Oklahoma. It paid decently, but it's just kind of going into the middle of nowhere and not exactly the area I want to go to. Oklahoma City is okay, right? But it's not like Dallas or like, Ohio or something like that. It's just meh, So anyways, found this one going from St. Peters to Enid, Oklahoma. $1,000, not too bad. It's just kind of going in the middle of nowhere. And I knew I was going to have to deadhead to find another load out of there. But I was like, all right, I just need to go. Yeah, I need to book something. So this is what I booked, St. Peters to Enid, Oklahoma. And now we're going to Oklahoma. So let's go. Okay, so I dropped that load in Enid, Oklahoma. Again, kind of the middle of nowhere, so I knew I was going to have to head probably to somewhere around Oklahoma City. So I was looking around, and again, trying to get at this point to Texas or back to the Midwest, but probably Texas would be more preferable at this point. So I was looking around, trying to find a load, and then I ended up finding this load right over here. This one's going from Marlow, Oklahoma to Houston, Texas. Marlow, Oklahoma is just south of Oklahoma City. Not a very good load because of the deadhead, but I knew I was going to have to deadhead out of Enid either way because it was just kind of in the middle of nowhere. So I'm like, all right, whatever. Didn't pay the greatest. However, it is going to Houston. And Houston, like Texas, is a good market. And in Texas, Houston is probably the best market in Texas with the exception of maybe Laredo because of all of the goods coming from Mexico right now because of the tariffs. So with the exception of Laredo or something like that, Houston is a very good market. So it didn't pay well. And I also had to deadhead pretty far to go get it, but yeah, I was in the middle of nowhere, so it's whatever. So found this one. We'll be in Houston, which will be a good market after we drop this. So this is what I ended up booking, and now we are going to Houston, Texas. So let's go. Okay, so I dropped that load in Houston, and now I was basically exactly where I wanted to be. And once again, I'm like, all right, let's get back on track. Let's try to find a load to Ohio or Michigan or something like that. Head back to the Midwest, basically. So I was looking around, and once again, couldn't find anything. I just couldn't find much. There was one load going from Houston to, I think it was Hartford City, Indiana, was where I was going. So I was like, all right, that's not too bad. But unfortunately, I couldn't get a good rate for it. So I think the rate they quoted me at was like $1,500 or something like that for about a 1,000-mile load. And I'm like, yeah, no. So I tried to get them up to, I think like 1,700 or something like that. And they just weren't having it. So that was fascinating. Last week I was just able to easily run from the Midwest to Texas and back and forth and get decent rates. This week, couldn't do it. So just very cyclical market. It's kind of very random. Last week that worked out perfectly and I did very well off of it. This week, I couldn't do it. It just, the lows weren't there. So that was kind of fascinating. So trying to find a load to the Midwest and I just couldn't find one. So it is what it is. So I was looking around. I think it was Wednesday when I dropped this one. Yeah, so when I dropped the load in Houston, it was Wednesday. And like, all right, so try to find something, anything. Again, just keep moving. I don't want to sit. So looking around, I'm like, all right, let's try to just go to Dallas, right? A shorter load to Dallas. So I was looking around and then I ended up finding this load right here. So this one's going from Houston, Texas to Lewisville, Texas, which is Dallas-Fort Worth. Paid pretty good, $1,000 for 264 miles. So it's good. Again, Houston is a really good market. Dallas is also decent. So yeah, so that's what I did. Found that load, and now we're going to Lewisville, Texas, which is Dallas. So let's go. All right, so we dropped that load in Lewisville, Texas. So we're in the Dallas area, and by that time it was Thursday, so I dropped it Thursday morning, and then I was like, all right, so it's about to be Friday, we're getting close to Friday, getting close to the weekend, so I can either try to find like another short load from Dallas to Houston, or I can try to find something like 1,500 miles that'll get me through the weekend, because I don't want to book a load for like 1,000 miles on Thursday, drop it Friday afternoon, and then it's Friday afternoon, I can't find another load, and then the weekend hits, and then I'm just going to have problems, right? So I either wanted to find just another short load just to fill the day and then grab something Friday that'll take me through the weekend, or grab like a 1,500 mile load that'll take me, truck just parked, grab like a 1,500 mile load that'll take me all the way through the weekend and Thursday and Friday. So either one of those was an option. So I was looking around, and if you look at Texas, obviously it's in the center of the right in the center of the United States. And then if you want to go 1,500 miles, well, it's either going to take you to like Pennsylvania, which is it's okay, or it's going to take you to like California somewhere, or Oregon or something like that. So I was like, all right. So looking around, either option was open. At this point, the Midwest wasn't really attractive because that's about a 1,000-mile run. And again, if I were to run 1,000 miles, I pick it up Thursday, drop it Friday, it's Friday afternoon. I'm gonna have an issue finding a weekend load. So I was looking around, and I ended up finding a load going from Dallas, Texas to Reno, Nevada. So ended up booking that one. Again, that's a 1,500-mile load though. It was Thursday. The week ends on Friday. So as a result, the Reno load that I booked is not gonna make the paycheck. So we're gonna go ahead and get into the spreadsheet right now. All right, guys, so as discussed, we're gonna go over week 7. So let's do it. For week 7, we did 4 loads. In those 4 loads, we got 2,146 miles, paid a total of $4,030 at $1.88 per mile. Fuel expenses, we fueled up 5 times. In those 5 times, we paid $982 at 46 cents per mile, and there were no maintenance expenses this week. Other expenses, OTR factoring, $20, scales, $55, for a total of $75 at 4 cents per mile. Totals for week 7, total expenses were $1,058 at 49 cents per mile. Total revenue was $4,030 at $1.88 per mile. That brought our net settlement to $2,971 at $1.38 per mile. All right, caveats for week 7. So big caveat here is that the load going to Reno, I picked it up on Thursday. I drove it Thursday and Friday. The weekend's Friday. So therefore, there's about 2 days on this paycheck that basically aren't here. So they'll be carried over to next week. So next week's paycheck will be a little bit juiced. However, if you were to, add about $1,500, roughly speaking, to this paycheck, I'd be doing a lot better. So there's about roughly 1,000 miles and $1,500 missing on this paycheck that'll be carried over to next week. So just keep that in mind. This paycheck is a little bit short as a result. Other than that, considering this is only basically 4 days of running, I thought this was fairly decent. So a lot of you guys have been harping that need to start shooting more for revenue per day. So about $1,000 of revenue per day. And I think you're basically right on that. That's something I should do more often. That's what I should go for. And that's what I tried to do this week. So you notice most of these lows are about $1,000, right? With the exception of this Marlow one, which was kind of a screwed up one. They're all about $1,000. Houston to Dallas, 1,000. St. Peter's to Enid, 1,000. Mesquite to St. Louis, the first one, a little more than 1,000. So they're all about $1,000. And I'm starting to realize, yeah, that's what I should focus on more. I should focus less on rate per mile. Rate per mile is important, but I'm starting to agree that the revenue is the more important thing. So that's what I've been trying to do a lot, and that's what I did this week. I basically just wanted to have something in my truck, even if it was a lower rate per mile, such as this Marlow one right here with the deadhead and everything. So I'm like, I'm just gonna keep something in my truck and try to go for $1,000 of revenue no matter what. And that's what I did, and it's working out pretty well. And if you look at last week, so I'm scrolling up to last week, that's basically what I did here, and I had the best week ever. This was a lot simpler though, because the loads going from the Midwest to Texas were available. So that worked out well. And I did it this week as well. And it worked out well as well, because again, there's about 1,000 miles of running that's not here. So I thought this went decently well. Again, tried to do the whole running from Texas to the Midwest and back this week. And it just didn't work out. Like I couldn't find the loads, which was very fascinating to me. Because last week, like there were quite a few loads going back and forth from the Midwest to Texas. This week, nah, man, I couldn't find them. I did just a handful of them, like 1 or 2. This one right here got canceled on me, Alton to Ohio, right? So that one got canceled, and then I just couldn't find anything else. So I was like, okay. So it's very interesting that that's been occurring. I thought that running from the Midwest to Texas, based on that last week, I thought this could be very much like a staple. I'll just keep doing this. But the market is just unreliable and unstable, I guess. Could not find anything going from St. Louis. Try to find a load going to like Ohio or something like that. And then after I dropped the load in Oklahoma, tried to go from Oklahoma to the Midwest. Couldn't find anything. Ended up just going back to Texas, which is a shorter run. And then I was in Houston, and I'm like, all right, I'll find something for sure here. Nope, couldn't find anything. So like, okay. So yeah, last week, no problem. I was just finding loads left and right going to these 2 areas. It was a fantastic run. This week, couldn't find it. Could not find it. So that's very interesting. yeah, the market is just very unstable, unreliable, whatever you want to call it. And the loads are, you just got to follow the loads. That's why I booked this one going to the West Coast. It was a long run that took me through the weekend, and I just couldn't find much of anything else. There were some other opportunities, maybe to go to like Atlanta or something like that. I could have probably grabbed something there, but I decided to go West Coast as well. Reno is an okay-ish market. It's not the best. I think I'll be able to get out of here for an okay rate, and if I can't, well, I'll just head into California, I suppose, and find something there. But either way, yeah, the Midwest to Texas run, it just did not work out this week, and it doesn't look like it's going to work out on a regular basis. I will try again because that is a nice run, but it is what it is. So there you go, week 7. All right, fuel. Fuel was a little high. I'm assuming that I started the week empty and then ended the week full, which would skew the fuel bill. So it's 46 cents per mile, which is pretty high. Yeah, just a little bit high. I was in a good area for fuel. I mean, these are like the 3 lowest fuel price states there are. Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas are like very low price, so that's good. But I still had quite a big bill because I think I just, I started the week empty and I ended the week full. So that's probably what happened here and why it's a little bit high. Maintenance expenses, we're lucking out, knock on wood. So far, nothing big. I'm sure something will come, but so far, pretty decent. Okay, yeah, and then other expenses, simple stuff, OTR factoring. I did factor one of these loads, and then scales. I had to scale quite a few times on these loads. They were pretty heavy. The reason why it's an odd number is because I filled up, or I scaled at a Quick Trip, and the Quick Trip, they cost me taxes, but whereas the CAT scales don't. So the Quick Trip has its own scale system, and they charge a different amount, and they charge taxes, whereas the CAT scales don't. I don't know, it's weird. So that's why it's such a weird number there. But anyways, basically nothing as far as the other expenses go. And then the fixed costs, also nothing. So that's interesting. So I said last week that I thought my trailer payment would come in. So I have basically 3 main payments, which is the insurance, trailer, and APU payment. So I figured they would come in every other, like 3 out of the 4 weeks they would come in. But basically, there's 30 days roughly in each month. And so there's about a 2-day period where the payment came in on that 2-day period, the 2-day grace period, I guess. So it will come in next week, and I might also get the trailer payment and the APU payment next week. But last week I didn't have anything, and this week I also didn't have anything because it was just a weird timing with the dates basically, and none of the payments came in again. So that helped a lot. But I think next week I might get whacked with both of these payments. So that's going to be about $1,100 or something like that. So that happened. But yeah, so far no fixed costs. So probably have a big payment come in next week. And then I think the week after that, my insurance payment comes in, which is $2,000. So that's going to be expenses as well. But yeah, there's that right there. No fixed costs. So there you go. Oh yeah, and then just scrolling down to the settlement page here. I mean, overall decent week. Again, there's actually like $1,500, give or take, on here that's not here. So if I had that on here, it would have been an even better week. So, but still, just shy of $3,000, $1.38 per mile. It's decent. It's good. Only 2,000 miles. Again, about 1,000 miles are missing on this paycheck, and I still did okay. So we're looking good. Yeah, that is week 7. All right, now moving on to the overalls. And ladies and gentlemen, we're back in the green. Okay, yeah, guys, so there it is, back in the green. It took us about a month and just about 20 days. I think I took my first load on basically February 1st. No, excuse me, March 1st is when I took the first load, and now it's the 20th as I'm filming this right now, and we're back in the green. Not by very much, 86 cents per mile, or $86. Not bragging about that one, but we're back in the green. Yeah, so that feels good. Now it's Profitville. Assuming next week isn't, my truck doesn't blow up next week, should have a pretty good week next week as well, I would think, barring a major incident or whatever. So that's good. Took me just about a month and a half, a little more to dig out of that hole. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll back up for the new viewers here. The reason why I was so deep in the hole is because startup costs. So to get my authority active, I ended up spending $18,000. So just 18 grand to get my authority active. A lot of this was initial insurance premiums, so that was the biggest one. Trailer down payment, that was a big one. And then just the DMV, registering the truck and everything, that was a big one. And then there were another number of other smaller things that I charged as well. And it put me in the whole 18 grand. So I made a video on that, and if you're interested, you can watch that video. You can just watch that video. I'm not going to go over it again. So yeah, 18 grand in the hole, and we just dug ourselves out of it after about a month and a half. So there it is. Now, for theoretical purposes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just delete these startup costs, and we're going to scroll back down. So I'm just scrolling back down here, all the way back down, and we're going to look at my totals without the startup costs, just to see what it's like on a weekly basis. Startup costs absolutely count, but just to give you guys a better understanding of what a typical week would look like, we're going to go ahead and go over these numbers right now, okay? So without the startup costs, my total expenses were $13,311 at 77 cents per mile, and that is my cost per mile without startup costs. My total revenue was $31,000 at $1.83 per mile, and my total profit loss would have been $18,343 at $1.06 per mile, and all of these loads are dry van loads. Yeah, so there's the numbers without the startup costs. So that's where we're at. We're making about $1.06 per mile. Now, the startup costs absolutely count. So for instance, my cost per mile here is really low because the initial insurance premiums of $4 grand absolutely counted, and that counts, right? So there's that. Other than that, though, I mean, looking pretty decent. I think by the end of the year, it's going to be quite interesting. So I compared, if you compare this to Landstar, it's close, right? It's getting pretty close. Now I do think short term Landstar is absolutely better because you didn't have to I wouldn't have to cough up 18 grand. So if you're looking short term, Landstar is definitely better. But if I keep at this for another year or two, or then 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, it looks like this is going to be a lot better. That's my initial assessment. Some of you guys are definitely asking which is better, Landstar or running my own authority. And short term, Landstar is better. In the short term, you'd be better off at Landstar. If you're thinking you're only going to do it for like 6 months or a year, Landstar is better, hands down. However, if you're going to run your own authority and you're going to keep at it for a year or 2 or 3 or whatever years, then I think running your own authority is better. And these numbers are starting to pan out and kind of indicate that. So this is sort of a long haul, no pun intended, a long haul operation here. You got to run it for at least a year and preferably longer. I think, if you started at Landstar on like January 1st and then ran to December 31st and you did the same exact thing, running your own authority, I think the numbers would be very close to one another, right? I think you'd be very close. I think they would both be about the same, and I'm guessing that's what's going to happen. So at the end of the year, when I compare this to Landstar, it's going to be about the same, right? However, next year, I think if you compared it on a 2-year basis, so if you compared January 1st to January 1st, 2 years from now, 2 years from that date, and then you took that timeline, like a 2-year timeline, and compared Landstar to running your own authority, I think running your own authority is definitely going to be better. That's what I'm looking at. That's what it seems to indicate. Time will tell, though. Still pretty early, but it does seem to be that Landstar is good for a short-term operation, and running your own authority is good for at least a year or more of trucking, if that makes sense. So we'll see how it goes, though. But so far, without the startup costs, 18 grand, $1.06 per mile, okay? So now I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here and go over averages and other information. So I went ahead and I unhid all of the averages and stuff like that. So here's the averages and other information. So this is the averages without startup costs. When I originally had this hidden because the startup costs, I had some of the cells hidden because the startup costs were just skewing everything, and things were like in the negative and whatnot. So it didn't make any sense. But I realized if I delete the startup cost, I can go ahead and show this. So we're going to go ahead and go over the averages and other information right now. Now, the one thing I am going to keep hidden are the variable costs and the fixed costs. So these still calculate the variable costs and the fixed costs, even though I deleted the startup costs, because it just calculates it basically cell by cell. So even though I deleted the startup costs, 18 grand, this calculates it cell by cell, and I would have to go back and delete every single thing, and I'm not going to do that. So with the exception of the fixed and startup costs, we're going to hide that. Some of you guys were asking if I'm keeping track of that, and the answer is yes, but right now it's completely skewed because of the startup costs, so that's the only thing I'm going to keep hidden as I go over these averages, okay? So let's go over the averages. Okay, averages without the startup costs. Average weekly paycheck is $2,600. Average weekly miles would be 2,400 miles. Total fuel costs, $6,500 at 38 cents per mile. Total gallons used, total gallons of fuel used is 2,043 gallons. We are averaging 8.46 miles per gallon, and we're paying an average of $3.21 per gallon. Total maintenance costs have been $2,200 at 13 cents per mile. If I kept that up for a 52-week period, I'd make $136,000 and drive a total of 128,000 miles. Our total revenue has been $31,000, and our average revenue per week would be $4,500. Total deadhead has been 1,500 miles at 9% of total mileage. We've been employed 49 days or 7 weeks, taking 4 days off, 45 days on duty, taking 20 total loads. Average load length is 864 miles, and if we had a theoretical $500 truck payment, we would have made $14,000. Okay, yeah, guys, so just going over some of the averages without the startup costs included in it. Again, I hid the variable and fixed costs here because these still calculate the startup costs in there, and I can't stop it because it does it like cell by cell. So yeah, there's that. So I'm just going to keep that hidden. You can see it right there, but it's skewed because of the startup costs. So keeping that hidden and going over everything else. Average mileage is pretty decent, 2,400 miles. This does include time off, so I took about 4 days off, so factor that in. Fuel costs, 38 cents per mile. That's pretty decent. I'm running a lot in Texas and whatnot and the Midwest, so the fuel prices are fairly low. Going out to the West Coast right now, so that'll probably jump up a little bit, but fairly low right there. 8.4 miles per gallon. So one thing I realized is that these numbers here, so when I book a load or whatever, I do the mileage based on what Google says the mileage is. Now that could be skewed a little bit, especially when you have to go through like a non-truck, like if it's taking you through a non-truck route, obviously it might be skewed a little bit. So there's that. But then I realized I wasn't actually calculating the out of route. So for instance, when I was taking loads from like the Midwest to Texas last week and back from Texas to the Midwest, I was going through Memphis, and then I was getting on the 30 through Memphis and then getting onto the 40 or whatever it is. So I was going that route, whereas Google says to go through St. Louis and then go through Missouri. The problem with St. Louis and Missouri is there's a lot more traffic, there's a lot more hills, and there's tolls on that road. So I was choosing to go through Memphis, which adds about 50 miles onto the route, but that's about 5% of the total mileage. And I started to realize that this MPG here was probably off, was definitely off because of that. So I should have been keeping track of what route I was taking and then properly documenting it here, but I wasn't. And I kind of realized that, and at this point, it's just simply too late. I'm not going to go back and try to remember which route I actually took. So that's that. So I think looking at this is slightly high. I think I'm definitely getting lower mileage in this. I'm thinking it's close to 8.1. Now my dashboard says 7.7. I don't think I believe that. I think I'm getting better than that. But I also don't think it's 8.4. I think it's closer to about 8.1, 8.2, somewhere in that range. So there's that. But the reason why this is so high is because the out of route mileage, I realized I wasn't counting, which was a mistake, but it's kind of too late. I'm not going to go back at this point. And I don't know, I might just delete it because at this point, it's not really accurate. So I might delete that in the future. Let me know what you guys think. But this number right here doesn't include the out of route mileage. So there's that. All right, moving on. Maintenance costs, pretty standard, 13 cents per mile. I expect to fall between 10 and 15 cents per mile for my maintenance costs over the course of the year. So that's right on the money. 52-week period, doing really well. It's not totally relevant though, because again, I have the startup costs there. So, you know, minus 18,000 from that, you're looking at about $120,000 per year, roughly. So okay, terrible market, so it is what it is. So you got that. 128,000 miles if I kept it up for an entire year. So that's pretty standard for a truck driver, especially full-time. So that's normal. Revenue per week, still fairly low. You guys are right. I need to focus more on revenue per week. So I'm going to really start focusing on that. One thing to note, I will point out, when I was at Landstar, you guys were harping revenue per week, but what I was experiencing at Landstar was the volume of loads was pretty limited. So I'm running just TQL and CH Robinson right now, and the volume of loads on just those two load boards is way more than it was at Landstar. So when it was at Landstar, right, I would haul a lot of short loads. And I didn't necessarily want to do this. It's just that the load availability was a lot less. So there were just less loads available on that one load board, which makes sense, right? It's just one load board. But now that I have access to 2 load boards, and they are the biggest ones, there's just way more loads available. So I can take higher revenue loads. So, I can haul from Texas to the Midwest pretty consistently, or I can haul from Texas to like Reno, like more consistently. And as I get access to more loads, the ability to book high revenue loads is going to get easier and easier. So that's one thing I'm really starting to notice, like a big difference between Landstar and the spot market is just load availability. Obviously, there is just way more loads available on the open spot market than just at Landstar. So that's interesting, and I'm able to focus more on revenue per week now because I have more loads available to me. So that's something to note. If you're going to go work for Landstar, it's going to be harder to focus on revenue per week than you think because there's just less loads available. So just an interesting note there. Deadhead mileage, 9%, kind of high. I want it to fall closer to 5%. I think 8% is acceptable. 9% is a little steep. Hopefully I can keep bringing that down, but we're a little high on the deadhead. And then other than that, pretty standard stuff. The truck payment. So this is what I would have made with a $500 per week truck payment and no startup costs. It's not super relevant though, because again, everything's a little bit skewed because of the startup costs, but that's what I would have made without the startup costs, but with a $500 per week truck payment, 14 grand. So about 70 cents per mile, but it's not too relevant at the moment because there's not enough data. Okay, yeah, so there are the totals with the startup costs. However, the startup costs absolutely count. So I'm going to scroll back to the top and I'm going to put the startup costs back in there. So now the startup costs are back in there. And if we scroll back down, we are at these numbers right here. So $86 in the green, and we'll see how it goes throughout the rest of the year, but looking better. Glad to be back in the green, and yeah, $86 in the green. So there you go. So there is week 7 and overalls. But yeah, there's week 7, guys. That will pretty much do it for this episode. If you are interested in finding a factoring company, you might try OTR Factoring. I'm currently using them, and they're pretty solid. I get paid usually within 24 to 48 hours, and they also have a fuel card with plenty of discounts. So I use that as well, and if you use the fuel card and the factoring, you get a discount on the factoring. So there's a link in the description down below. If you're interested in them, please check them out, and it does help me out a ton when you do that. And if you are interested in this spreadsheet or any of the other spreadsheets I've done in the past, you can also find them in the About section down below. After you find them, you can open them, then just hit File, Download them to a Microsoft Excel sheet, and then after you download them to an Excel sheet, you are free to use them however you please. But that will do it for this episode. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.